Okay, ready to dive in. We've got a fascinating topic today, all about the operating systems that power, well, pretty much everything around us.
It's amazing how much we rely on these systems without even realizing it.
It really is. And you've given us quite the reading list with these excerpts from Wikipedia's usage share of operating systems.
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive look at which systems are calling the shots in the digital world.
Exactly. And looking at the global picture, there's a surprising twist. We often think of Windows as the dominant force, but as of September 2024, it's actually Android with a commanding lead, right? Like 45% market share.
You got it. It even eclipses Windows' still respectable 25%.
That's a huge difference.
It really highlights just how massive the shift towards mobile devices has been. Smartphones aren't just for calls anymore. They're how we work, connect, consume entertainment. They're practically an extension of ourselves these days.
It's true. I feel lost without mine. And Android's dominance in the smartphone market definitely plays a role in its overall lead, right? Something like 72% of smartphones worldwide are running Android.
It's closer to 71.67%, but yeah, pretty much. And that has huge ripple effects that go way beyond brand loyalty. Think about it. Website, design, app development, how businesses reach their customers. It all revolves around this mobile-first reality.
It's like the digital landscape itself is adapting to this mobile world. Okay, so Android is king in the smartphone arena, but what about tablets?
Tablets are an interesting case. Apple's iPad, running iPad OS, still holds the lion's share globally, but Android tablets are gaining ground, particularly in regions like South America and parts of Asia.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag there, with no clear winner just yet.
Exactly. Just goes to show that user preference can be really context-dependent, Things like pricing, regional trends, even just cultural associations with certain brands can all come into play.
It's amazing how these market forces interact. But before we wander too far into the realm of smartphones and tablets, we have to talk about desktops and laptops. Are they going the way of the dinosaur?
Not quite extinct yet. While smartphones are definitely on the rise, it's crucial to remember that desktops and laptops still have their place. Windows still holds a respectable 71% share in that domain.
Okay, so the rumors of the desktop's demise have been greatly exaggerated.
Precisely. There are still plenty of tasks and situations where the processing power and, frankly, the ergonomics of a traditional computer are essential.
That makes sense. You're not going to edit a feature film or write a novel comfortably on your phone, at least not yet.
Exactly. However, even within the realm of desktops and laptops, there are some interesting trends emerging. macOS is steadily gaining traction at around 15% share, and even Chrome OS, which is often grouped under the broader Linux umbrella, is holding its own at around 6%.
Interesting. So even in this more established market, we're seeing signs of evolution, a gradual shift in user preferences. What's driving that, do you think?
It's a complex interplay of factors, really. The increasing affordability of alternatives to Windows is definitely playing a role, but so is the rising popularity of cloud-based applications. Since so much of what we do now relies on the cloud, the lines between operating systems are blurring a bit.
So the playing field is leveling, in a way.
Exactly. The cloud is making it less about what operating system you're using and more about what you can do with it, regardless of the device.
It seems like even in the digital world, the only constant is change. And speaking of change, this whole trend towards mobile browsing has some pretty huge implications, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We're living in a mobile-first world. In many parts of the globe, particularly in Asia and Africa, smartphones have become the primary, if not the only, way people access the internet.
Wow, that's a significant shift. It must have huge implications for how websites are designed, how information is shared, even how we think about the internet itself.
Exactly. This isn't just a passing fad, it's a fundamental change in how people interact with the digital world. And even in regions where desktop usage remains strong, like the US, mobile internet usage is rapidly catching up.
So regardless of location, optimizing for mobile is no longer optional, it's essential.
Precisely. Whether you're a web developer, a content creator, a business owner, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Ignoring the mobile experience is no longer an option if you want to stay relevant.
It's like the internet itself is becoming untethered from the desktop, more fluid, more accessible than ever before.
It's a whole new world of possibilities, and it's exciting to see where it takes us.
You know, it's funny, we've been talking about all these devices, phones and tablets and laptops, but there's this whole other world of operating systems quietly working behind the scenes, the real workhorses, you know?
Oh, absolutely. We can't forget about the systems powering the servers and supercomputers that make our digital lives possible.
Exactly. So what's the operating system of choice when it comes to those heavy hitters?
Well, believe it or not, it's Linux. It's the dominant force in the world of supercomputers, powering practically every single top-performing system globally.
Really? Linux? I have to admit, that's not what I would have guessed. What makes it so well suited for that kind of demanding environment?
It's a fascinating story, actually. Linux has a few key advantages that have made it the go-to choice for supercomputing. First and foremost, it's incredibly versatile. It can be tailored to work on such a wide range of hardware, from those tiny embedded systems we talked about earlier to the complex architecture of a supercomputer.
So whether it's a tiny sensor or a massive data center, Linux can handle it. It's like the Swiss Army knife of operating systems.
Precisely. And maybe even more importantly, Linux is open source. That means the source code is freely available, which might not sound groundbreaking, but it's this openness that allows for an unparalleled level of global collaboration and innovation.
So instead of a single company controlling everything, you have developers all over the world contributing to Linux's development, constantly making it better.
That's exactly right. It's a global community effort, and it's resulted in an incredibly robust and adaptable system, perfect for the high-stakes world of supercomputing, where performance is absolutely critical.
It's amazing what can be accomplished when people share knowledge and work together. Speaking of how technology evolves, the article also mentioned the decline of mainframe computers, those massive room-sized machines from old sci-fi movies. What happened there? Did they just vanish?
Not entirely, but their role has definitely changed. It's more a story of evolution than extinction. See, the rise of networked personal computers and servers, which often run on Unix-based systems, Linux being a prime example, offered a more efficient, more cost-effective way to handle computing tasks.
So instead of relying on one giant central brain, we started networking smaller computers together, more decentralized, more adaptable.
Exactly. And just like the shift from desktops to mobile, the evolution of the mainframe really highlights how computing constantly adapts to meet our changing needs and priorities.
It really is a never-ending game of technological leapfrog. But all this talk about operating system usage makes me wonder, how do they even measure this stuff accurately? Especially with so many devices and systems out there. It can't be as easy as counting, right?
You're absolutely right. It's far more complex than a simple head count. The article actually touched on some of the challenges, particularly with the rise of embedded systems. Because they're tucked away in everything from cars to appliances, they're not as easily accounted for as, say, a laptop or a smartphone.
Right. They're kind of like the silent majority of the operating system world. So how do they even begin to measure operating system usage in this increasingly complex digital landscape?
Well, one common method is to look at web browsing data. It gives you a snapshot of which operating systems are being used to access the internet. But even that has its limitations.
Oh, I bet. What about all the devices and systems that aren't connected to the internet, or those that might use an operating system but not a traditional web browser?
You're spot on. It's like trying to understand the entirety of a rainforest ecosystem just by looking at the birds that fly above the canopy. You're getting a glimpse, but you're missing a whole lot of what's happening below the surface.
So much happening under the surface, powering things we don't even think about. It makes you realize those usage numbers are just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Absolutely. They give us a glimpse, but like you said, there's a whole lot more going on. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with some pieces missing. You can see the general picture, but there are still gaps in our understanding.
A perfect analogy for the tech world, wouldn't you say? Always evolving, always something new to discover. But even with those missing pieces, the insights we do have paint a pretty amazing picture of how dynamic this world of operating systems really is.
It really is. Think about it. Who could have predicted, even a decade ago, that Android, an open-source mobile operating system, would end up being the most used OS worldwide?
Right. It's incredible. I mean, it really shows you the power of collaboration and how quickly things can change in the tech world. So, where do we go from here? What does the future hold for operating systems? Any predictions?
If I had a crystal ball, I'd be a wealthy man. But one thing's for sure, this constant evolution we've been talking about is not going to stop. If anything, it's going to accelerate.
Driven by what? What are the big forces shaping the future of operating systems, you think?
Well, we're already seeing the impact of things like artificial intelligence, the rise of the Internet of Things, even the way we work is changing. Operating systems are going to have to adapt to all of that and more.
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? What new innovations will we see? What challenges will developers have to overcome? It's like a technological adventure unfolding right before our eyes.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And who knows, maybe we'll look back at this conversation in a few years and be amazed by how much has changed. just like we look back at the mainframe era today.
Exactly. Well, on that note, I think we've given our listeners plenty to think about. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just this. The world of technology, especially operating systems, is never going to stand still. So stay curious, keep exploring, and most importantly, never be afraid to dive deep.
Well said. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.